Welcome once again to our March Lunch and Learn, and happy Social Work Month.
Yay!
My name is Sarah Elrod, and I'm on the Lunch and Learn Committee, along with Kayla, Angela, Rosa Linda, and Silala. Did I say it right? I did. Silali, that was right. I apologize. All right, so today we're celebrating Social Work Month, and we're lucky enough to have the NASW here today. And to speak with you is Janlee Wong. He's the Executive Director of the California chapter of the NASW. But before he begins, I'd like to also introduce Dr. Amy Levine.
Thank you for filling up the room. I understand that free food helps get that done. I just want to say that we are really fortunate to have Janlee Wong come. He is an advocate of CSUN MSW program. He is on our advisory board. And during our meeting this morning, I was encouraged to publicize CSUN MSW more. So in that vein, for his 20 years of service to NASW, to Social Workers of California, we have a whole host of items. Janlee will be drinking from a Janlee will be drinking his coffee at a CSUN. He will be wearing a CSUN t-shirt during lobby days, and he will carry around a Master of Social Work. And enjoy his presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Levine, Social Worker of the Year.
You guys are very fortunate. Dr. Levine is one of the top people in the state as far as education, social work education, academia, leadership. I'm so impressed with her, and it shows it in the program you have here. So, you know, if you ever need to talk to her, she's very accessible, as you all know. I don't want you to flutter with a lot of questions about where's lunch or something like that. But she's a huge resource for you. And as you go through your MSW program, your faculty, like Jose Ramos, Dr. Levine, others, this is your chance to really connect to people in the know with a lot of experience and help you with your career in the future. Some of you might be graduating soon, so it's one of your last chances to get that input in about what should I do, what job should I take, where should I go? Because as you know, in social work, it's such a versatile profession. You have choices. Now, it's not like, oh no, I'm looking for a job, I can't find one. You will find a job, and you will get a job, and it will be a social work job. And your chance to say, I'll do this job, what'll happen to me after I start, after a couple of years, what'll happen to me. This is a chance to ask people, you know, what should I be thinking about when I get this job? Should I take this job? Is this job too hard? I heard all these things about this job. It sounds like a bad job, you know. But no job is a bad job. Whatever you get out of the job is going to benefit you in your social work career, especially if you are able to put some good time in, learn the things that you have studied here at the school, and then you could just take off, like unbelievable as far as going from this particular practice area to that one, going from a nonprofit to county, back to nonprofit. I mean, you just have so many opportunities, plus you have licensure. You have licensure too. So hopefully, any of you interested in licensure? Okay, good for you. Because licensure will help you do a couple of very important things. The first is increase your salary or compensation. I think people are interested in that, right? And open the doors to other jobs for you, right? People are interested in that, right, too? It takes a little extra work, but you'll be a better social worker after you go through that work if you're interested in clinical social work. So please, think of licensure that way. We encourage it because the more professional, the more licensed social workers we have, the better the profession is going to be. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about a number of things. I'll give you a brief bio on myself, and then I'll talk about some of the issues that we're hearing during the presidential debates. Anybody listening to that stuff? Okay. So that's actually very contemporary. We're in a special era, 2016, the presidential year, elect a president, and they're actually talking about issues that are very social justice related, very, very social justice related. So let me start with my own background. Son of Chinese immigrants from China who came in the, my father came in the 30s, the Great Depression of the United States and the world, and my mother came 10 years later, post-World War II. So I'm going to stop there for a minute. Why was there a 10-year separation? Anybody know? Immigration laws barred Chinese women from immigrating to the United States. Anybody know why? It's the same issue affecting many communities today. There are some nationalistic, xenophobic people that are worried about having too many kids of color. So one way to stop these groups is to not allow the women, the wives, the sisters, the daughters to come here. There was a federal law that said no Chinese women allowed to come to the United States because they were afraid that these Chinese women would have Chinese babies and somehow take over the United States. Does that sound familiar to you guys? I am sure that you're feeling sometimes that some of those candidates are saying that very thing, all right? Saying that very thing. So, but what happened, why was my mother eventually allowed to get here and have my, myself and my 4 siblings? What happened? The law changed. It was repealed during the middle of World War II because China was an ally of the United States fighting the war against Japan in the Pacific Theater, and the Chinese said to the Americans, we can't really be your ally if you have this law that discriminates against Chinese people. So they repealed the law, and my father was on the first ship. They didn't really fly around in those days, by the way. They were on the first ship. He was on the first ship out back to China, to the village, to bring my mother to the United States, okay? So when they got here, when my mother got here, my father had already started a business. He started, what kind of business do Chinese people run?
Laundry.
Come on.
Dry cleaning.
Dry cleaning, gardening, or
Restaurants.
restaurants.
We didn't want to say it.
Don't you guys eat Chinese food? The funniest thing is in many Chinese restaurants, the cooks are Latino.
Chinese restaurants.
Many other restaurants.
Exactly, and many other restaurants too. So anyway, my father got his start in the restaurant business. He knew nothing about restaurants. He didn't know anything about cooking. He was from the village where all they did in the village was farming. They were farming, growing rice. But during the Great Depression, there wasn't that much of that either. Because the whole world was in a worldwide depression, starving people all over the world. My mother talked about, as she was growing up during the Depression, starving people in the village. I mean, no food, no work, no money. So when he got here, he got a great opportunity to purchase a restaurant business. This was in Riverside, California. He lived in San Bernardino. So this happened right after Pearl Harbor. So I'm trying to get you guys to think, that's part of graduate school. It's critical thinking. What happened after Pearl Harbor to a certain group that got sent away to internment camps? That Japanese Americans were sent away. Are we hearing a little bit about something like that now? Certain groups aren't going to be allowed here, and certain groups here should be rounded up and something done to them? Or that's already being done to some of our communities, right? Being rounded up and sent to detention centers. So this Japanese American in Riverside had a restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, believe it or not. He got sent away to camp. My father and his two partners went to Riverside, bought the business from him. So what I also like to weave in is things that we as social workers, we know are important to people, but we don't know the science or the connection behind it, which is just this sort of cosmic fate, you know. So one group's misfortune of being rounded up and sent to camp became the benefit of another group, in this case, my father. And fortunately, he did well in the business. He sent all 5 of us to college, even though he had no college himself, and my mother had no college. He had a high school education in China, and my mother had a 6th grade education in China. But he was able to send his kids to college. So once again, I am sure there are some people here who are first-timers in college in their family, at least first-timers in a master's program, right? It's the same immigrant story. Now, why am I saying that too? It's because if we are afraid of immigrants, if we are worried they will be a burden on society, if we think they only here to have babies and get welfare, which I hear often, even though it's 2016, we just need to point to ourselves and say, it ain't so. This is not the story. If we're worried about, you know, hordes of babies, you know, my parents had 5 kids. This was in the 1950s. They were from the old country. Old country people think of having kids. You know, that's the way old country people are. But their kids are not going to have 5 kids. I only had 2 kids. I'm not going to have 5 kids, in no way. Neither of my siblings have 5 kids. You see what I mean? That whole myth of like being taken over by all these people is just a myth. You know, once your standard of living improves, you don't want to have kids anymore. Seriously. Seriously. In fact, my mother was criticized for having 5 kids by her own peer group who had been here a few years before her. And they said, are you crazy? Why are you having so many kids? Stop! Stop it! Stop it! And the light bulb went off in her head. Maybe she would have had 12 kids. So, and that's not unusual. All of us know some immigrant families from the old country, the grandparents or the grandparents had 14 kids, or 10 kids, or 9 kids, or whatever, and a farm, etc. But not here. Not here. So I also want to tell you one more story that's both the immigrant story and a cosmic fate kind of story, and it's a really important one for California and for the United States and for our communities. So during World War II, once again, the misfortune of the Japanese Americans, there was a farmer in Westminster, California, Orange County, not far from here, and he had to go to camp. He had a farm labor manager who was Mexican American, Mr. Mendez. Mr. Mendez. So once again, this happened throughout California history. There were wonderful people that helped the Japanese Americans out. So Mr. Mendez said, you know, I will look after your farm. I will take care of your business while you are in camp. And when you come back out of camp, just come back here, it's your farm. You know, but I will do the work. You know, I will manage it. So anyway, he moves his family into the house on the farm. Across the street is an elementary school. He has a 5-6-year-old daughter. He wants his daughter to go to the elementary school across the street. No problem, okay? He has a sister. She has a daughter, same age. He says, okay, hey sis, can you take my daughter and your daughter over there across the street, register them for school? Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's go across the street, bring the 2 little girls, show up, speak to the principal, and the principal says, this daughter can stay and go to school here. This daughter has to go to the Mexican school 1.5, 2 miles away from here, across the railroad tracks. How did that principal decide? Skin color. I like this group. Critical thinking. Right? Critical thinking. Skin color. Mr. Mendez's daughter was brown. His niece was light-skinned. So at first, you think, well, in those days, people just took it. It's like, that's the way it is. Or unfortunately today, when we talk about the South and the symbols of the Confederacy, they say it's history, it's tradition, it's this, it's that, as if to make it legitimate, right? But Mr. Mendez was having none of that. He was entrusted with the farm to take care of it. He had a family. He was Mexican American. He wanted his children to get a good education. He wanted them to go to a school nearby, even though it was pretty much an all-white school. So he said, I'm going to hire some lawyers, which is completely shocking. Right? What? You're going to hire lawyers? He hired lawyers, filed lawsuits, and he won his case up to the California Supreme Court. Therefore, desegregating schools in California forever. Forever. This was a Mexican American who did this. I'm not downplaying the Board of Education decision that went to the Supreme Court that was brought by African Americans, which was such an important case, Brown versus Board of Education. But they studied the Westminster versus Mendez case, learned the lessons, and applied them to the Brown versus Board of Education case. Now, how do you like that? I mean, we did it here in California. Our communities did social justice. They made a difference, and they helped eventually change school desegregation, get rid of it for the whole country. So I want to point out that we too can do that ourselves. These are ordinary people. Mr. Mendez was an ordinary person. The Japanese American family that got sent to camp, they were ordinary people. But we can do it. We just have to have it up here. And that's why, as social workers, we have a big element of social action, social justice in our programs. If you ever wondered, you can be honest, we're all social workers here. We love you, we're inclusive. Some of you may have thought about, well, maybe I should do the MFT program. No joke here, right? The MFT program. And fortunately, you chose social work. But only social work, I'm not exaggerating here, only social work has that social action, social justice, advocacy element in its program, in its curriculum, in its ethics. Pick up the MFT Code of Ethics, it's not in there. Look at their curriculum and their courses, it's not in there. Now you might be thinking, well, how does that make me a better clinician if I want to be a clinician? If you don't understand why some of your clients have issues today that are related to these issues, you're not that good of a clinician. You're not that good of a clinician. Let me give you another story. I am talking to a Chinese American. He happens to be the vice president of the Save Our Chinatown Committee based in Riverside, California. We're at a Chinese banquet in Rosemead. I'm talking to him. And he's telling me, I don't know how to talk to my African American brothers and my Latino brothers and sisters. I don't know how to talk to them about affirmative action. And in specific, there are some Chinese American organizations that oppose affirmative action, particularly when it comes to the Ivy League schools. We're talking about Harvard, Yale, Princeton, etc. And their rationale, this group's rationale is, well, it should be merit-based, right? It should be merit-based. So if you're the best student, you should be able to get into the best universities. I mean, actually, we all probably are sympathetic with that, right? We're thinking, yeah, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is. So he's talking about this, kind of perplexed. As a social worker, you learn to observe people, listen to people, understand people, kind of get where they are. So he actually wants to talk about this. If he's perplexed, he wants to talk about this. A golden opportunity, right? Somebody wants to talk to you about a kind of controversial topic, a scary topic, because you don't want to be called racist. I don't want to call, this Chinese American, you're racist, because you're opposed to affirmative action. I don't want to say that. And that's not what it's about anyway. So I say to him, well, let's go in the time machine. And that's because I know a little bit about Chinese American history, and I know a little bit about this person because he's on the Save Our Chinatown committee, which is about history, right? Save the history, save the heritage. So I say, well, the Chinese have always valued education, okay? When we look at Confucius, his top principle was education. If you look at his hierarchy of who shall be respected, who shall be honored, it's the teacher at the top of the hierarchy. It's the teacher. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm just pointing out what was thousands of years ago in China versus what we do here. Here, we don't have the teacher at the top, unfortunately, sadly. In fact, teachers are under attack now, as you know, because our public schools aren't so good. But in the Confucian hierarchy, the soldier is at the bottom of the hierarchy. I know it's risky to say that, because later, one of you will report to the president of the university, Janlee Wong was unpatriotic and he wasn't supporting our soldiers, We should have their banners, on the street. Actually, I was in Corona yesterday, and they have banners up and down the street of people who have served or actually served, which I don't have a problem with. But I want to point out to you this Confucian hierarchy that dates back thousands of years and how they put it. They put teachers at the top. So I said, if we have that kind of history, then we're going to value education super more extra special thousands of years, right? Thousands of years. And I said, well, the other thing is the Chinese language and the Chinese civilization. Now, many of you don't know, but the writing system, all those characters that sports figures tattoo on their arms and stuff, that writing system goes back that length of time too. And it's the same one today as it was thousands of years ago. So something's going on in the Chinese education system and their civilization where they're using a writing system that goes back thousands of years. I mean, you're thinking, well, English is like that old. No, English is not. I'll give you another example, which I told him. Egyptian civilization, about the same age as Chinese civilization, right? The Great Pyramids and all this stuff. The Egyptians forgot how to read Egyptian. I don't know how many of you know that. They forgot how to read the hieroglyphics. I mean, I couldn't read those hieroglyphics, but they couldn't read it because they forgot their civilization. They forgot their language system. It was only until the 19th century that European archaeologists cracked the Egyptian hieroglyphic writing system. And the way they did it, anybody know? Rosetta Stone. They found this multicultural writing tablet called the Rosetta Stone. That's why we love multiculturalism too. Don't let anybody put it down. It's so powerful, it helped us translate the hieroglyphics, because one of the languages on the stone was Greek. And people knew Greek and they could read Greek. So they did Egyptian, Greek, European languages, got it. We translated the hieroglyphics, okay? So after explaining this to my Chinese American friend, he was starting to kind of pick up what I was saying. It's like, oh, Chinese, this, thousands of years, education, etc. They just carried that tradition on until today. But then I had to point out to him, well, what about African Americans? Did they go back thousands of years? Did they have a writing system that goes back thousands of years? Did they have Confucian philosophy that valued education? And I said, when they were brought here against their will and oppressed and mistreated and seriously injured or killed, they were not allowed to be educated. it was against the law to teach slaves how to read and write, believe it or not. So here we go. You have the Chinese like going, whatever it is, education forever, and you have African Americans brought here against their will, not allowed to be educated. In fact, you would be seriously punished if you were educated or tried to learn reading and writing. So we have completely opposite sort of histories here, completely opposite. Plus, somebody might say, well, that was during slavery. Slavery's over now. Whether it was yesterday slavery, today no slavery, the same stuff continues. So how good was the education system for the slave than for the freed slave? Not very good. They had to build their own education systems. Nobody was going to help them. And as you all know, until the Civil Rights Movement, they were not allowed to go to the same schools as everybody. They had to go to schools that were so substandard that it's a wonder if anybody could have gotten education in those schools. And if you ever go to Washington, D.C., go to the American History Museum. They have a display of 2 classrooms side by side about the Brown versus Board of Education decision. The black children classroom is almost like an outhouse, compared to the white children classroom. That's how big of a difference there was in the education system. So my friend started to get it. He's like going, well, I guess we didn't all start out equal. It's like, duh. And he goes, well, with the unequal beginning, you can understand why some people are disadvantaged. Now, somebody still might say, well, it's still about merit. But is it really? I mean, we did not have a level playing field. How could it be equal? How could it be about merit? So I said, well, I know you still believe that whoever has the highest scores should get into Harvard. I get that. But I said, the minimum that we could do to earn the trust of people in our communities is to speak up and to speak out, okay, to be an advocate, to take social action and to take political action. So I said, next time you have the opportunity, you need to speak out for the African American community, for Latino community. You need to say there are some things in our society that are not equal, that are still unfair, that are still discriminatory. You just need to speak out. Nobody's expecting you to change the whole world or anything. But the more everybody speaks out, the more chance we have of a better society. Right? That's what I said to him. And he said, I'll try. And that's all we want. So what I'm telling you this story is, if you're a social worker and you've learned to listen, you've learned to observe people, you've learned to critically think, you've learned your history lessons, you know something about social action and social justice and advocacy, you are already well prepared to talk to people, to get them to join in the movement, to get them to be part of the effort to make for a better society. How many of you have a little experience doing that, being an advocate, speaking up for people? Tell me a little bit about your experience.
Sorry.
I'm sorry I put you on the spot. But
I can tell a
Well-
little story while you're chewing.
Okay.
When I
Sure.
was a social work intern in New York City, I was placed in the Lower East Side Family Union, which is a very poverty kind of area of New York. And my client's family, because there were 5 Puerto Ricans, and there was a mother, a 20-year-old daughter, and a 16-year-old daughter. The 20-year-old had 2 kids, the 16-year-old had 1. There was another daughter, and there was a son. Well, there's lots of people. Anyway, one mother and her 2 kids moved back to Puerto Rico. So the mother reported it to the food stamps office, or the food stamp people, social services. So what they did, they took the whole family off. So this family, while I was visiting them, they said, well, we made up a job. Everybody has a job. They have to go out, and even the 10-year-old kid, the youngest one, and bring in $1 a day. It doesn't matter how they get it, they just have to make sure they bring $1 each day so that we can eat each day. This was in 1982. So I said, well, that's ridiculous. Why do they let's go down to the food stamp office and see what's going on. And so we went there. You have to go in the basement, you have to call up, they had all these locked doors, everything. Finally, it turned out that I just kept calling and hitting on them and pursuing it and all that. Finally, one day, I got through, and I got to the secretary of the head of Food Stamps of New York City, and I said, I need to talk to Mr. So-and-so. I knew who it was at the time. And she said, no, you can't talk. No, I said, yes, I can, and I will. And you better put him on the phone right now. And she did. And he said, what? What happened? I told him like a very brief story. And he said, well, that's ridiculous. He says, hold on a minute. He came back on the phone. He says, okay, they're all back on now, and they'll get the retroactive food stamps. It was somebody pushed the wrong button in the computer. Their case was there, everything was there, all they had to do was say yes instead of no. So you just never know what's going to happen. So go ahead, sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, my story isn't as exciting, but I intern with a few students in here, and I feel like we are constantly, as politely as possible, correcting, because there's a lot of MFTs and we don't have the same values. And so one of my preceptors, my preceptor, I was trying to explain to her about prison rates and the difference in, minorities versus whites. And she's like, don't you think it's just, they need to have, pretty much hold accountability for their own behaviors? And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, have you ever heard of like a prison to pipeline system? Have you ever heard of a caste system? Do you know what Jim Crow was? She's like, no. I'm like, exactly. So yeah, so I try, and as I'm learning, I don't know it all that well. So I find myself not like I'm trying to fight, but it's like my swing isn't that good. But I know what I want to say. But yes, like you should always have your little pocketbook or of like bullets, so you could come out and be like, no, well, in this year this happened and blah blah blah, because they just don't know. And so I'm learning, like, it's not that they're bad or anything, they just have no idea.
That's an excellent story, because actually you've done a service there. Many MFTs compete with social workers for jobs, and they get them. They get them in welfare agencies, they get them in child welfare agencies, they get them in senior agencies. They're kind of all over the place. Part of the reason, it's not because employers don't want to hire social workers, there's not enough of them. I know that sounds weird to you because you have USC down the freeway here, and they produce like thousands of social workers. They do. But there's just not enough social workers. So agencies are forced to hire MFTs, whether they like it or not. But your benefit, your gift to that MFT is now they know something. I don't know if they'll apply it, but it starts with knowing first before you can apply it. Now they know something. So when they encounter a client and they can't figure out why they can't therapeutize them to do this or to do that, if she remembers your story, she will be able to incorporate that in how she approaches the client. Right? We start where the client is. And if they see that, all they have to do is recognize that we know. That's all they have to do. They will start listening to us. They will start trusting us. And then we will be using the therapeutic relationship to help somebody, to help improve their thinking so they can help improve their own life on their own. So you provide an opening, a gift for that person. Hopefully they kind of know how to take advantage of it. Now I put this slide up because of course this is a paid advertisement. If you need, we have a whole crew of wonderful NASW loyalists in the front row here. Joni, Merle, and Peggy, plus our wonderful staff person Jolene back there. But here we are talking about micro, macro, MFTs, working with clients. Let me first give you my favorite slogan I made up just recently. There is no micro, there is no macro, okay? That's a mantra. I want you to repeat that after me. There is no micro. There's no macro. We're all the same. As a social worker, it's harder to convince people like Peggy. The younger people, they get it. The younger people, they get it. Okay. There's no micro, there's no macro. Because just as this example that we've been talking about, where we're working with people, and if we know something about what has led them to where they are today, and it doesn't necessarily have to be psychological theories, I mean, that's important, but it could be their culture. It could be their history, their upbringing, their environment, their situation. We can help them if they trust us and they believe us to become empowered and enlightened. It's not just a cliche. And then they take control of their own situation, because ultimately that's what it's about. Now, sadly, looking at the Flint, Michigan situation, very sad. The people in Flint, Michigan tried to protest. They tried to say this is wrong. They tried to do something about it. But the power structure, particularly the governor on down, were not listening to them. They were not listening to them. And unfortunately, allowing their children to be poisoned. Let's just call it what it is. It wasn't like bad tasting water, or funny smelling water. You drink the bad water, it poisons you. And if you know about lead poisoning, which I know all of you do, it particularly affects children. It particularly affects children. It's very hard to reverse some of the effects, very hard. So they tried, they weren't part of the power structure in Michigan, and their children were poisoned. So the reason why I bring that up is because we need many voices. We need power in numbers sometimes to make a big difference. So you're a social worker, you're an advocate, you're doing your very best on the job, you have a huge caseload, but you're only one voice. And by the way, you are so worked, perhaps overworked, you're kind of like, I can't do too much else other than my job right now. I am not going to be able to do much after work because I am exhausted after work. Some of you might be feeling that way now. Okay. There's where the power in numbers comes in. That's where, if you're part of a professional association, there is power in the professional association if you're supporting it through your membership. If you're allowing us, NASW, to listen to you about what the critical policy issues are so that we can work on your behalf to make your jobs easier, right? I mean, that's what it's about. So you might think, well, let somebody else do it. Well, if too many people say, let somebody else do it, let somebody else be a member of NASW, we're not gonna have a lot of members. Okay? If you can be a member, especially as a student, with the membership fees pretty low, you will actually be contributing to all those things that we've been talking about. Our Michigan chapter of NASW is pitching in to help the people of Flint, Michigan by setting up a volunteer sign-up program, not just for social workers in Michigan, but also for social workers from around the country. So I know that Peggy is going to sign up and she's going to move to Flint, Michigan, and she's going to help give out water bottles. I mean, it can be anything. It can be giving out water bottles or helping organize political rallies and get rid of those people that not only didn't help, didn't listen, didn't care, but they're still trying to cover up their role. It wasn't my fault. I had nothing to do with it. There's your critical thinking again. If you read any articles, you read the interviews of some of these officials, read between the lines. It's not me, that person. Not me, that person. No, it's you. You were there. They came to you and they said, this water is bad. And you just said, in effect, drink it. And not only that, let your kids drink it. Okay? So then when they say that, we say to them, you need to be gone. You need to be gone. Right, get them gone, right? Am I right? But being part of a professional association is one of the keys to magnifying your voice, helping you have a stronger, larger voice. But it's not like we don't care about you and we just want your money, even though that's what it sounds like. We do believe in the profession. We support the profession. We are probably the greatest advocacy organization for social workers. You know, somebody might say, well, now my union is the greatest advocacy organization. No. Unions represent all workers. They don't just represent social workers. So what happens when the union thinks that a particular issue could divide the union membership? Right? What will the union do? Nothing. Because all members are union members. All workers are union members. So what issue might come up that might divide union membership? Critical thinking. Title protection. Now, you all spending all this money to get your MSW, but then when you get out there, sometimes the employer doesn't really respect it. Sometimes the employer says, you're the same as somebody without an MSW. That is why we want title protection, and that is why the struggle is so hard. Because we're pitted, NASW is pitted, against the employers who don't want to recognize title protection for social workers, and the unions who don't want to recognize title protection for social workers. We have to fight these two giants. They are giants. The employer controls the jobs, the job descriptions, the job classifications, the money, everything. And the unions speak for the workers, even though all the social worker members of the unions want title protection. All they have to say, the union says, well, the majority of the workers in our union don't want it, which might be true. We don't know. They didn't take a poll or anything. But there are certainly more non-social worker members of the union than there are social worker members of the union. That's why you all need to help us continue that fight for title protection. Otherwise, your degree here is just a tiny bit reduced because it's not recognized. It's not respected. So we still need to carry on that fight, even though it's been terribly difficult. NASW has worked every year to try to find ways to keep that fight going, and we will prevail. But we need your help. We need your help and we need your support to do that.
Isn't it true that anybody can call themselves a social worker?
Absolutely.
Whether they have
In this state, yes.
Because we don't have title protection.
Correct.
So the idea is only people who are trained professionals in social work should be called social worker. The rest
Right.
should be called something else.
I put this slide up because I know none of you want to move from the sunny state of California in the middle of the El Nino rainstorm. Let's say for some reason you have to move, okay? And you move to another state. And by the way, if it's a better job with more pay, move. Social workers have the versatility of not only being a nationally recognized degree. Seriously, we are one of the few nationally recognized degrees because all of our schools are accredited by the Council on Social Work Education. Now, sometimes you're groaning and moaning like, why do I have to take a research course? Or why do I have to take a, they never say that here, right? They never say that here, right? It's because it's in the accreditation requirements from the Council on Social Work Education that the value is every MSW school in the country has the same requirements. So your degree is a national degree. If you move to Texas, why? You move to Texas, MSW is the same in Texas as it is here. If you move anywhere. Now, what isn't the same is licensure. Licensure is state by state. And it's not that unusual. When you go to Arizona and decide to live there, again, I don't know why, you will have to get a new driver's license, am I right? You will have to get an Arizona driver's license, okay? If you decide to pursue a second career, which if you've got the time, money, and interest, go for it. Like if you want to get a law degree, there are a number of social workers, MSWs, that have law degrees. It's not unusual. And law is a partner with social work in trying to get change. Because the cases I mentioned to you were lawsuits. And they had a big effect. They had a big effect. So if you move to Kansas, I don't know why, and you're a lawyer, you will have to get licensed by the Kansas bar, right? So it's still a sort of a diverse situation with licensure, but what NASW is trying to do, and we're trying to do it this very year, is we're trying to make the hours requirement for getting your license uniform across the country. So we're trying to go for like a 3,000 hour requirement across the country. Right now we're at 3,200 hours. So if we're successful, I'm trying to hear some thank yous. Thank yous. 3,200 hours to 3,000 hours. We have several licensees here. Wouldn't that be good, Janlee? She just got her license. 3,000 instead of 3,200. Yeah. So that's what the dues that members are paying us to work on here in California are being used for, to really benefit you directly. So why is that important? Because when you move to another state and you're licensed here, if we have the same hours requirement, the transfer or getting the license in the new state will be a lot easier. The other thing that NASW did and worked very hard on for 10 years was to make sure we were using the same national clinical social work exam as every other state in the country. We were the only state that wasn't using the national exam. And the reason why is back then, 10 plus years ago, we had some licensing board members that thought California was all it. You know, it's like everything we do in California is so much better and so much superior to the rest of the country. I don't know why they thought that. I didn't think that. That we need to have our own clinical exam because it would be better and more specific and really fit California. And it's like, fundamentally, social work believes that people are people. We don't think some people are better than other people, nor do we think some people are worse than other people. People are people. Individuals have a different story. They're unique. We understand that. But overall, people are people. We believe in that. So we can't say we're better or our population is special or we need this or we need that. We need to really kind of look at a bigger picture, the no micro, no macro picture. And we need to say, if we're going to do social work in New York or New Jersey or Wisconsin, it's going to be the same social work as we do here in California. And NASW, being the national organization, is working on that. We're trying to streamline and make sure that social work is practiced the same in every state. Okay. This is my favorite academic intellectual slide. It's called the 12 Grand Challenges of Social Work, put together by academics. They call themselves the Academy. Okay, the Academy, am I right? They call themselves the Academy. Anyway, a bunch of super brain deans and presidents of universities, all in social work, put this list together. They said, these are the big challenges that we need to work on in the next 5 to 10 years throughout the country. Okay. So the first thing I did when I looked at it was, there's a lot of verbiage here. It could be sort of edited and revised. There's some overlap.
Yeah.
Critical thinking. You can do that. Don't let anybody tell you you're not a good writer. You can be a good writer. But you need to practice and you need to critically think. Writing is not just grabbing the pen. See, unfortunately, where's my, do you think this is my pen? No, this is my pen. Okay. But this is not writing. This is writing. Why? Because in the time that it takes to type a sentence on this, I will still be writing the first 2 or 3 words with this. But I will be thinking about those words that I'm writing. On here, I'll be thinking, am my thumbs hitting the right keys on here, and am I making typos? I'm not even thinking about the content. I'm just thinking about, I'm trying to get this written on my phone, because the keyboard is too small, you know. So, or if I'm at the big keyboard, I'll be thinking, I need to get this paper done like right now, and I'm typing as fast as I can, and I'm not thinking about what I'm writing. Okay, I'm not thinking about what I'm writing. So we can all benefit from thinking before we write. Slower, being slower. I know it sounds terrible. It's like, are you kidding? The paper's due tomorrow. I have to get it in to Professor Ramos. It's due tomorrow. He's going to be on my case. I'm writing it as fast as I can. Now, none of you, for sure, those other students, by the way, none of you think when he's reading those other students, none of you, he's reading their papers going, who wrote this? He's thinking, I need to get my red pen out, and you know. That's what you should be thinking when you write your papers. Think about that. You could be your own Professor Ramos. You take your own paper, you get your own red pen out, and you could be marking up your own paper. Well, maybe he doesn't mark up that to that detail. Maybe he just puts a red question mark, right? That's even better, actually, because then you have to think about what does he mean with that red question mark. You have to think about it. And you know that there's something about it that he's questioning because it's a question mark. Then you have to think through, what is he questioning? And could it be this, or could it be that? And pretty soon you're thinking, this sentence isn't that well written because I'm not sure if it's this or if it's that. I think I need to rewrite that sentence. Okay. That's how you get to good writing. And I know you all can do it. So don't let anybody say, oh, social workers aren't good writers. Actually, I hear that all the time. Really? Don't let anybody tell you that, okay? Don't, especially if you go work for the county and you go work for child welfare services and they ask you to write court reports. Court reports are the most stilted, incomprehensible language ever written because the whole process, whether directly or indirectly, is overseen by attorneys, right? County counsel represents the county in child welfare hearings, am I right? They're the ones that are going to be saying this court report is no good. But that's their perspective. That's their perspective. And of course the judge is going to reinforce that because usually the judge is an attorney, right? So we have two battles there. The first battle is to be a good writer. But the second battle is to make sure that we provide the professional social work perspective in our court reports, which is always being overwritten or rewritten by attorneys. So they go, that's not relevant. You know, who cares about that? You see what I mean? So we are an important part of the system, but we have to be good thinkers and we have to be good writers. So,
Janlee,
yeah.
we have about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
I know students have another class and we'll probably need a break between.
no problem.
You know, so I don't know if there are any questions anybody has for Janlee. Anybody want to, any specific questions you want to ask? We have one more thing after this, so don't leave us. One more thing, but any questions? Luis?
Unless anybody else has a question, students. Okay, so you touched upon child protection. What is the current state of affairs in child protection now?
So we're waiting for the right legislative makeup to try our approach again, and perhaps a new governor. Okay, sadly. But part of the legislative lobbying process is to factor in whether the current cast of players are going to be sympathetic to it. So that's what we're waiting on. We have pretty much all the material we need, plus we have the language, etc. But now we're just waiting on who is going to be favorable to us to help us get it through. Any other questions? Yes,
How often do you revise your paperwork?
revise my,
Your entrance paperwork, or like this?
this was the first time I've ever seen something like this done. So, yeah, I would actually thank you for reminding me. I should send a revision to them. They're gonna kind of laugh because they're gonna go, he's not a dean, you know, he's not a director, he's not an academic. Why is he sending me this stuff? But that's a good question. Other questions? Okay, we're done. Thank you.